Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is actually iron. We're going to be ironing before we sew. So get your iron, get your ironing board, and your seam gauge. We get to use our seam gauge. We are going to be creating a clean finish. And a clean finish means that the edge is not going to be able to fray. So what I'm talking about fraying, what I mean is here's the edge of some fabric. Oh, and I do have to say, I had my green fabric and I was about to get started when I realized you couldn't tell the wrong, and this is the wrong side, the inside. This is the right side, which I call the pretty side. And the green was the exact same on both sides, and I need you to be able to see the wrong and right side so that you don't get confused. So I cut out a new bag out of this adorable star fabric, which is great because this month is stars. And so this is what my bag is going to be out of now. Anyway, so here's the edge of it. And this is frayed right here. Do you see this? And this edge could be frayed. Fraying means you can pull out the weave. See that? I can just pull it out. Well, we don't want that to happen inside of your bag. So to prevent that from happening, a clean finish means you do something like fold it. And if I just fold it once and sew, I could still kind of get to that, but it would help. We're going to end up folding it twice and tuck that little edge inside. So a clean finish just means we're preventing it from being able to fray in the future as you use it and whatnot. We don't want all these threads coming undone. So the top of our bag that you're going to be reaching in and out of, right here, let me grab my bag. So here's the bag we're going to be making. And if you look on the inside edge here, you see it's folded under and inside. This is a clean finish. A clean finish means there's no frayed edges showing or open. So then it can be washed, you can put things inside and out, and you're not going to catch anything on that edge and pull out the fibers. So we're going to create our clean finish. That's the first thing we're going to do. So to do that, first thing we need to do is we need to remove our pins. And remember, we drew this fold line. So what we can do is remove our pins right here. And that fold line, you can do this one of two ways. We can fold this fold line with this pattern still on it and fold it right on that line, like that, and then press it. And you could press with the paper, or you could move this out of the way. That plastic will melt. So you don't want to do that. Also, your pin heads could melt, so make sure there aren't any pins in the way of your iron. But you can see just that tiny press, I already got a line. So fold it down. You could fold the paper back and then just get it right up to that line and press that. And when you press, make sure you get your fingers out of the way. You might have to hold it for a second, but as you get close, move your finger. Press. So now I've just pressed that fold line. Isn't that awesome? So you don't have to do that with the paper on it. We can measure it as well. So I'll show you that too. So now we take off the paper. And we know this is the top of our bag where our fold line was. That also helps us know where we're at. So the fold line is helpful for a lot of reasons. So what we want to do, if we didn't do it that way, is measure this. And what did we do? It was 1.5 inches, right? So what you could do is then you can unfold it or leave it folded so you can see it better. I'm just going to leave it folded. And you would measure 1.5 inches down and fold that. So let's see if we can do this. You can see it well. So you just pull it until it gets to 1.5 inches. And I love this seam gauge. Let's go to 1.5 inches and then check it out. Is it folded at 1.5 inches? I'm a little bit big right there, so I could push my fabric up, but that's not very much. You want it to be even, so let's see. Oh, I'm a little bit big on all of it, it looks like. So since it's all even, it looks good. It's a straight line. So then you would press it, and there's your 1.5 inches. So if you want to see, here, let's unpress the paper part. I pressed that line good, didn't I? Okay, so we know the top was 1.5 inches. And so what you want to do is you just fold this down and and measure 1.5 inches and hold it down, measure 1.5 inches, and see you put this thing right there and kind of hold it and then iron it. And there's our 1.5 inches. So we just created our top of our bag fold line. So there's 2 different ways to iron that. And if it's feeling too thick, oh, actually, you're going to have one folding one way, the opposite way, and one folding that way. So we can fix that. But it gives us our line. So just fold it now the opposite way and press that. And you can measure either direction. I could do it this way, or I could do it this way. But I love this little tool. And then just hold that, and let's fix that line. It's going in toward the inside of our bag. So we want that fold line toward the inside of our bag. Okay, so there's our fold line. Now, if we were to just go sew this, we would still have a raw edge. A raw edge means that it can fray. So when I say raw edge, that's what I'm talking about. Well, we don't want any raw edges on the opening of our bag. There might be some on the seams, but those aren't going to be bumped or used as much, and our seam will be big enough that they'll be okay. But on the opening of our bag, we want a nice clean finish. So to do that, we're going to unfold that, and we're going to fold this over 1/4 inch. Now, if that's a little too skinny for you, that's okay. You can go a little bit bigger. 1/4 inch is, here's halfway, and there's 1/4. So it's 1/4 inch is 1/4 inch. That's what you're shooting for. And that is a little small. So like I said, if it's a little bit bigger, that's okay. Don't go more than 1/2 inch. So between 1/4 and 1/2 inch will be fine. And you can just measure it on here. We're going to do 3/8 inch. We have enough here in our fold line. So let's do 3/8 inch. And the reason I'm saying that is it's a little tricky to press this all down. It kind of can stretch if you pull it funny. So if it's a little wider, it can be helpful. So do anywhere from 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch. And I can eyeball that pretty good. I can see that it's even. And I'm going to iron that. And now I don't want to unpress my line. So I'm going towards this edge. And you want this nice little even edge. And if you think you want to just check every once in a while and say, okay, is it the same? Okay, it's looking good. And continue to press that until you have the whole top of your bag pressed down. Do you guys see where we're going with this? So there's our first little press. Well, our second little press, but our first press that we get to go sew. So now it's time for the sewing machine. Get your thread and meet me at the machine. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually sew this edge we just ironed. We're going to be sewing along the very edge of it. So it's called an edge stitch. An edge stitch is about 1/8 inch away from the edge. Now, if that's a little bit hard for you, it can be bigger. That's okay. This is going to be a little bit tricky. So hopefully you've practiced on your machine sewing some straight lines because you're going to want to go as straight as you can. But that's why we're sewing this bag. It's to practice sewing. So this will be perfect. Now, if you're worried about it coming unfolded while you're sewing, see how it can come unfolded? You can just hold it. But you also, if you bought clips, you could clip every once in a while just to hold it in place. You could also put some pins in if you want to hold it in place if you're worried about that edge unfolding while you're sewing. Or if you start sewing and the edge starts to unfold, then I would recommend that you clip or pin it. Let me see. I got some pins in here. So I'll show you for pinning. When you pin and sew, with that clip, I use pins more than clips, but my girls like the clips. You're going to take your pin and just kind of go right in the middle of that, and it will just hold it down. Then as you start sewing and get close to that pin, you remove it, and I'll show you when we start sewing. Now, to sew, we need to get our thread on. I'm going to use this contrasting thread so that you can see my thread really well. So I'm going to use this gold thread, and I am assuming that you've watched how to thread your machine and you already know how. I'll quickly do a review. My presser foot is up, so remember, presser foot, don't have it down, make sure it's up. Take your thread. It should go, like those. There should be a back part that it goes into, and this is our tension. and that's why your presser foot has to be up, and it goes down in here and then next to our tension dial. So remember that. Ooh, I think I just hit one of the clips. And then loop around, then up, and then into your thread take-up lever. So you can't see it on this machine, but it should be, it goes down, then up, and then back down, and then behind your, there should be some kind of hook or something that's keeping the thread down close to the needle, and sometimes there's two. On my machine there's two. There's this one right here, and that helps the thread not fling out of this area. And then there's this tiny one right above my needle, and there's often one right above the needle to help just line it up. So there's a quick review, and then I always clip the end so it's nice and fresh. And I lick my fingers and I flatten that thread, and then I stick it in the hole and pull it through. So there's our quick review of threading. And so you'll want to thread it first and then get your bobbin. And with my machine, it goes clockwise. Your manual should tell you which. If it's an older machine and you don't have a manual, it's probably counterclockwise. And then make sure you get it in the little edge underneath this tension clip and all the way in, and it should hang. Now if I go like this, it will slide down. That's perfect. Okay, then we're going to put it in. So just a quick review, and it's not in all the way until it clicks. I said click right when it clicked. So I don't know if you heard that, so let me pull it out. I want you to listen. So there, it clicked in. And then turn your hand wheel and hold your top thread, and it will loop around. I don't know if you saw it, but it'll loop around and grab our bottom thread. And there we are. And we are ready to start sewing. Okay, pull your threads up and over to the side, and we are ready to go. Let's zoom in a little bit closer to this machine so you can see. One more thing before we start sewing is we're going to be doing a stitch length, just a straight stitch. So on my machine, here's my straight stitch. And we're going to be doing a stitch length of 3. So right now I'm at a 2.5. I'm going to go up to a 3. So if you have a dial or whatever, do a stitch length of 3 on your machine and get that set and ready. I also have this cool cover to help extend the part right here, and a lot of machines have that. That sometimes catches your thread, so I just cut my thread. All right, so I have my cover on. You don't have to have it on. I don't have to sew with it. It just makes it nicer because it gives you more, I don't know the right word for it, but I can set my fabric up by the foot a little bit easier. And we're going to do an 1/8 of an inch stitch. So what you want to do is remember 1/4 of an inch was right next to our presser foot, and that's what you practiced. 1/8 of an inch, I'm going to go in really close so you can see. First, I guess I'll set this. 1/8 of an inch is just like on the inside edge of your first feed dog. Do you remember the feed dogs? So I'm going to go just on that inside edge, go a little past your fabric. And let's see if you can see that. Okay, so see how I'm lined up just kind of on the inside edge of my presser foot, a little bit past it. And there's a line, so you may not have a line, but just the inside edge of your presser foot, 1/8 of an inch. It's 1/2 of a 1/4 of an inch. So it's a small stitch length, or not stitch length, it's a small seam allowance. It's an edge stitch. It means you're sewing on the edge essentially. We're holding this down. So we're going to go ahead and start, do 3 stitches and then back stitch. So my back stitch is right here. I'll hold it down. It's going to go back. Okay, and when you start, you want to hold your threads usually. Some machines, it doesn't matter and they don't pull. But some machines, when you start, those threads will yank. And so it could come unthreaded. So hold your threads when you start. Once you've started and are moving, then you're fine. Okay, so I'm going to just go along. Now I have this pin in here and I don't want to sew over it. So I'm up to where the presser foot is. I'm going to take that pin out. And you don't have to pin it. If you feel like it's helping, then definitely pin it. And then I have the clip right here, and I'll leave that clip in until I get right to it. And I'm going to sew. Okay, so now I'm right to the clip. I'll take that out and just hold it with my fingers and sew along, nice and straight, and sew that line all the way along the edge. So it's an edge stitch. As I get to the end here, we're going to back stitch. Let's see, I don't want to be in the way. And back stitch a little bit before the very edge, because some machines might pull it down into where the needle goes down. So backstitch before you get to the very end, but close to the end, and do some back stitches. And then go off your fabric, lift up your presser foot. If you have a cutter, some machines have like a cutter right here. You can use your cutter. If you don't, then use your scissors. And that is what it should look like. See my nice edge stitch? So that's an edge stitch. Okay? It looks awesome. So you've sewn your first line, and I like to always clip my threads from the beginning when I started. So get those threads out of the way. These other things, you can see it's fraying already where our raw edges are. So it's nice. We're making this is going to be a nice clean edge. Now, if your pressed line right here, remember we pressed our fold line down. If you don't have a good crease there, go repress that. Oh, sorry, I'm not showing it very well. So make sure this is pressed really good so that you can see that line well across the whole top, okay? So it should look like that. All right. But we're not going to sew that down yet, so that's kind of tricky. You're going to actually lift it back up. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to start sewing the side. I have this nicely pressed. We'll be folding that down later, but not quite yet. We're going to do this really cool trick. And what it's going to do is we're going to make a hole. I mean, we're not going to cut a hole. We're going to sew something that's going to allow our drawstring to go through like this. See how we have this nice opening for this drawstring that has no raw edges? So that's what we're going to create next. And to do that, you're going to need your seam gauge, something to mark with, or you can use pins. And what we're going to do, and I don't think I've talked about this yet. This is our pretty side. This is what I call, this is the right side. It's the side that you want showing. The wrong side is the inside of the fabric, okay? When we sew things together, we generally put right sides together. And I usually say pretty sides together, okay? So right sides, this nice side, pretty sides together. We're going to line those up and put those right together like that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pin or clip it. I'm just kind of getting this so my edges are right together. You don't want it like this. You don't want to see that. You want them right together. Line them up nice and straight. Okay? So just like that. Should look like that. The top matches. And then we're going to measure down 1 inch. So measure down 1 inch, and it should be really close to your fold line. It's just a little bit above your fold line. If you can't see your marking, see my white pencil isn't showing very much. You can also just use a pin or get another pencil. You could actually use a regular pencil because it's on the inside of our thing. So it's on the inside of the fabric, it's not going to show. So I could use a regular pencil line there. Then we're going to measure 1 inch down from that. So another inch, draw a line. So see my line there? Let me pull out this pin. So we have 2 lines. We go 1 inch, mark it, skip 1 inch, mark it. Okay? That might seem a little confusing, but don't worry. I will walk you through this, and it's really neat what we're creating. So I do actually want you to put a pin there because we don't want to sew from here to here. We want to leave this inch area open. And if we put a pin there, it will help us remember. Sometimes I forget, and I'm like, oh, I just sewed past my mark. But if I have a pin there, it helps me remember. We want to sew to the pin. We're going to skip and then continue sewing. We're going to be doing a 5/8 inch of a seam. And what we're going to do is we're going to start here at the top, 5/8 of an inch. When we get to the pin, we're going to when we start, we're going to backstitch. So let me back up. We always backstitch. Then we're going to go just 1 inch and backstitch again. Then we're going to lift our presser foot up and slide this and start right after this pin and backstitch again and go down to this corner. And then if you practice this before, we learned this nifty term called pivot. Then we're going to pivot and then continue to sew and then sew backstitch at the end. So we're going to go do that now. All right, get your bag ready to that point. Okay, I just came to my machine and realized that where I marked and pinned it is on this side, and I don't want to sew on this side, or I don't want my seam allowance on this side. I mean, you could do that, but this gets in the way and it gets bunched up in the arm. So typically you have your seam allowance on the inside of the machine, and it will be easier to sew that way because you can see it better and then you don't have fabric bunching up. So you can just flip it over. It's not a big deal. We didn't mark it on this side, but we have our pins marking it. So it's totally fine. But I wanted to just point that out in case you were like, I marked it on this side. It's totally fine. And if your pins, if you want to switch them around, I like them switched the other way because it just rides nicely. But that's my personal funny preference. Okay, now we're going to do a 5/8 seam allowance. So let's see if you can see on my machine, 5/8 is right here. It is, I'm going to put the presser foot down for a minute. I have my presser foot down. That's at 1/4 of an inch. And then it's the third line away from 1/4 of an inch, because 2 lines would be 1/2 of an inch. And so we're going to be right here at this third line after. So 5/8 of an inch maybe seems a little bit big, but actually it's an excellent seam allowance because this is going to be a raw edge. So it allows for some fraying to happen without your bag getting ruined or without what you've made getting ruined. So let's go ahead and line our bag up with that line, this 5/8 of an inch line. Put it under your presser foot, just a little bit past the needle. Start sewing. Do like 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3, then back stitch. 1, 2, 3. And in fact, your back stitches sometimes are a little smaller than your stitches. They usually stay at the average size stitch. So sometimes you might have to do a 4th back stitch to go all the way back or whatnot. Okay, now we're going to go very slow and careful here. You're just going to go to your needle or marking. If you're scared that you're going to sew to your needle, you could start pulling it out so that you don't actually sew to it or sew on it, and see where it's at. Okay, I'm right at my needle. So now, or my pin, I'm going to take it out and I'm going to back stitch again. 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3. Now my needle is up. I'm going to lift my presser foot. We've sewn that 1 inch there. And now we're going to skip this area. So I'm going to jump to my next pin. Make sure you stay on the 5/8 of an inch line. And you don't have to clip your threads or anything. They can just hang out. And we'll clip them when we're done. Now I'm going to set this right down just past my pin. I keep calling it a needle, don't I? Pin. It's a pin. So then I'm just going to pull my pin out because I know that's where I'm starting. I'm on my 5/8 of an inch line, and I'm stitching at a 3 stitch length. And I'm going to go ahead and do 1, 2, 3. Then I'm going to back stitch 3. 1, 2, 3. And now I will continue sewing down the side. Now, if you're worried about this moving while you're sewing, go ahead and put a couple pins in there to hold it in place. So I could stick some pins to hold that in place. Or if you have clips, you could put clips. And that just helps hold your 2 fabrics together, because sometimes they do like to pull a little. Different machines pull at different, the top can sometimes pull a little faster than the bottom because the feed dogs do pull on it and the top's not pulling. So sometimes machines don't pull the top and bottom quite as evenly as you would like. Just kind of depends on your machine. So you may or may not want to pin it or hold it in place. But if you feel like it's going to be pulling one of the fabrics or they're not going to stay right together, go ahead and pin it. And then we're just going to keep sewing at 5/8 of an inch. And as I get close to my clip, I'll just take off my clip and put it away. And keep going. And keep your fingers out of the way. Then as I get close to my pin, I start to pull it out and pull that out. And make sure you put your pins away in a pin cushion or in something so that they don't fall on the floor. No one gets hurt or injured. Be a responsible seamstress. I like to just keep my pin cushion right by my sewing machine. Now we're coming to the bottom corner where we're going to pivot. My stitch plate is 5/8 of an inch where it starts, right here at this edge. Let me see if I can point that out. So this edge right here is about 5/8 of an inch from my needle. If you don't have that, you can use your seam gauge. Let me pull a seam gauge out here and see, okay, where is 5/8 of an inch? Let's get that clear. This is the 1/2 inch mark. So 5/8 would be one more. So I put this right at 5/8 of an inch. And then I can check that. You're like, okay, I see it goes to right here. I'm going to stick a pin right at my 5/8 of an inch so I know where to turn. So I'm going to keep sewing up to that pin. Okay, I'm about to get to it, so I'm just going to pull it out. And then you're going to leave the needle in. So I'm going to turn my hand wheel and leave that needle in. Okay, we're going to pivot now. And also, do you notice I measured it, but also I am right at the edge of my stitch plate where it begins, where the metal begins. So a lot of machines are going to be similar because the 5/8 of an inch is a standard seam allowance. So yours is very likely like that. I can't guarantee it. Okay, then remember pivoting, you lift up the presser foot, you leave the needle in. Let's see, can you see that? Go a little lower here. And see the needle is in. Okay, then we're going to turn. And we should be right lined up on the 5/8 of an inch line, and we are. So then we just continue sewing. And we're almost done, you guys. We are actually almost done sewing this bag. You're doing awesome. Then as I get to the end here, I'm going to slow down and get ready to backstitch. So now, 1, 2, 3. Ooh, I kind of did 4 or 5 there. I went a little fast. Okay, and then I sew off and lift up my presser foot and then clip my threads. Go back to my beginning where we started. And look, you guys, it looks awesome. Our nice little pivoted corner where we skipped. Let's take our scissors there, and now we're going to clip those threads. See where we skipped? Let's clip that thread there. And then I'm going to clip my beginning threads and then my back thread. And those frayed threads will get out of the way. Okay, so now we have our bag is really getting close.